So I wanted to think like Jack. I wanted to strategize like Jack. I wanted to hold my club like Jack. I wanted to swing like Jack. I wanted to approach the game like Jack. Because this was the greatest golfer that ever lived. And I wanted to pattern my golf game after him. Just makes sense. If there was only talent, I could have been on the PGA Tour because I knew how to play like Jack did. Do you know in many ways, you know what a Christian has done? A Christian has bought a book called Life My Way by Jesus of Nazareth. And we've said, Jesus, we have never seen anybody do life as spectacularly as you. You are so functional, so whole, so powerful, so joyful. You do such good things wherever you go. It's like you know how to do life better than anybody else. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to learn to do life just like you. And if that's what we're trying to do, the fact that Jesus never tried to usher in a culture that lived under the law of God through political maneuvering, that ought to say something, shouldn't it? Right? Not only did Jesus not model it, are you ready for this? Jesus warned us against it. Did you know that? Look what the scripture says here in the book of Mark chapter 8, verse 15. Be careful, Jesus warned them. Watch out for the yeast or the leaven of the Pharisees and that of Herod. We might be familiar with the fact that Jesus warned us against the influence of the Pharisees. That's against legalism, that somehow by living to some external moral code you could earn favor with God. Watch out for that. That's a trap. That's just religion. And we're familiar with the fact that Jesus also warned us about the leaven, the yeast, or the influence of the Sadducees. That's skepticism. Believing that there really isn't things supernatural that the God of heaven can still do in our day and time. But we miss the fact that he also warned us of the leaven, the influence of Herod. There were in Jesus' day a group of Jews who were called the Herodians. And the Herodians were actually a political entity inside of Judaism. And what they believed was simply this. That they believed that the rule of the Herods, it was a dynasty in that particular area of Palestine, that their rule would create a political climate most favorable to the practice of Judaism. And so they began to politically lobby to make sure that the Herods were in good favor with Rome, who let them be the governor over the area, to make sure that all rivals were put down and that the Herods were the family that was in power. Because what they believed is that through political maneuvering, we could create an environment where we as Jews could best live the life that we want to live. And Jesus said, go watch out for that influence. Jesus is warning us that the belief that through political maneuvering we could create a more Christian a society, that we create something that is more like living under the laws of God. Watch out. Jesus said, that's move. Watch it. That's a trap. But boy, did Christianity ever go that way. Remember the 70s and 80s? I do. I've read history books. The moral majority, the religious right, the Christian coalition. Anything inherently wrong with any of that? No. But underneath that was the conviction that if we could just muster up enough political power, that we could get the right people in the right places and the right laws and the right justices on the court. And by doing all of this stuff, we can finally have a culture that is living out the laws of God. Now here's my question. That's been going on for 30 years. And yet the people in that movement will say we are farther away from the laws of God than we were 30 years ago. I think Jesus realized how tempting it would be for desperate people who see things in culture trending the wrong way to be seduced by political action in order to change the heart of the culture, in order to change the laws of God so that we could live like we all want to live anyway. I remember reading a book. It was called In Harm's Way. It was about the sinking of the USS Indianapolis. July 30th, 1945, on a very secret mission, they had delivered parts of the atomic bomb that was going to be dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And they were making their way back to the South Pacific, and they got sunk by a torpedo from a Japanese submarine. And because their mission was so secretive and hardly anybody knew where they actually were and what they were doing, that when that ship went down, it was 5 days before they were accidentally discovered. When that boat was torpedoed, 300 men were killed instantly. 900 were cast into the sea where they spent 5 days. When they were rescued 5 days later, only 321 of them survived. The rest of them died from injury, exposure, sharks, dehydration. They interviewed some of the survivors of this for the book that was written, and they said probably one of the most grueling sights was this. They learned that if they would all stay together, clinging to some floating debris, that in that mass they could help each other if they started to kind of freak out. And when they stayed in mass, the sharks would stay away. It was always the ones that went out by themselves that got attacked and eaten. And they said the saddest thing was this. Over a couple of days, people began to hallucinate. They began to see an island just right there 100 yards away. They began to see loved ones holding out canteens with water and boats, and they would begin to swim away, and they'd try to grab them and go, no, it's not real. But seduced by the illusion, by the hallucination, they would swim thinking, there's the hope, that's the life right there. And then by themselves, they would swim off and drown, and they would swim off and get attacked and die. So that was unbelievably tragic. And I think it can be that sometimes we can find ourselves in such desperate times, and it seems like things are all falling apart around us, and we so fear where our country or our culture is going, and the future becoming so murky and dangerous that we go, we've got to change this, what we can do. And it's like we see them out there. If we just get politically active, if we just get the right candidates and laws and judges, it'll work, and we begin to swim out in quest for that. Jesus is saying it's a mirage. It never works. Because the only people who can live out the laws of God are people whose hearts are in sync with God. That's it. It's a matter of external constraint. It's a matter of internal willingness. And until people's hearts become in sync with God, they are never able to live out, live under, live by the laws of God, even if they were to believe the laws of God were right. Our hearts have to be in sync first. I find it fascinating. The ultimate statement of the laws of God are called the 10 Commandments. Anybody ever heard of them? 10 Commandments. All right? Here are the 10 Commandments. I talk to people sometimes. How do you know you're right with God? Or you ever think about, what do you do? Well, I try to keep the 10 Commandments. Great. What are they? Cleanliness is next to godliness.